What's up, real ones? It's your host, Rueben. I don't dodge the tough questions, and I'm never afraid to speak the truth. If you're new here, welcome. We celebrate stories, unpack the hard stuff, and talk about the things that actually shape us. So take a breath and lean in. This is Getting Real. Getting Real. Getting Real. What's up, real ones? We are back with another episode. And as you know, or you may not know if you're watching or listening for the first time, but my podcast is based out of San Antonio, Texas. And we are going through a lot in Texas right now. And I say we, meaning anyone that resides or has family or has children in Texas. And with our guest today, it made me realize that now is the time to talk. So I've been staying up countless nights, kind of feeling a fire in my gut and in my bones and everywhere in my body, because I feel moved to talk about something. And it's this new bill is probably, by the time you listen to this, going to be on our governor's desk. And I felt this fire to talk about it. And I'm with our guest today. I'll dive a little bit more, but this is my moment to tell you guys, if you're listening or you're watching, to start paying attention more than you ever have before, to speak up, especially coming from someone like myself, who I'm in an industry where the minority I'm part of a minority in my industry. So being in real estate, it's not normal for us to be, as liberal as I'd say I am, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're listening to this, whether you're in a real estate industry or you're in an industry where you feel like you're a minority, just make sure that you're just speaking up and you're talking about it. It doesn't have to be a taboo topic or a conversation. I think we should kind of veer away, in my opinion, from talking about politics at the dinner table. Like, there's a way to do it, and there's a way to talk about values and core values and ethics without offending anyone, if we're just speaking the truth. So that's my spiel for today. I just think that we listen with open ears, and we're intentional today while you're listening to this episode, because although we're gonna have a lot of fun and we're gonna get real, there are some serious things that I think we need to start really, really honing in on. So before I get started today, here's a word from our sponsor. This episode of Getting Real with Rueben is sponsored by Luis Guajardo with Mortgage Capital. He is a mortgage lender, and he knows his stuff. So if you want killer rates, if you want someone who's going to understand you, more importantly, and the process, then you need to contact Luis Guajardo with Mortgage Capital. He is amazing. Thanks again, Luis. All right. So now we get into the fun part. I'm excited to introduce this next guest. Maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but this next guest, number one, I've known her since I was a freshman in high school. We cheered together in high school. I've now helped on her campaign. So if you also follow me on social media, you may now understand who this next guest is. She now has announced that she is running for Texas House District 118 once again, and we will dig all into that. So, I don't want to waste any time before I ramble on and say things I shouldn't yet. I want to introduce Kristian.
Oh my God, Rueben, I'm so happy to be here.
Yay, I'm so excited.
Like you said, we've known each other for 20 years.
Yep.
We both went to McCullum. You were our cheer captain.
Yes, I was.
And I love being from the South Side, because I feel like even though we're like decades away from being in high school, we still have our deep roots.
Yeah.
And that's what being from the South Side is about.
Yeah.
So, I'm running for House District 118 again. I'm really excited. I actually just announced my relaunch earlier this summer, and you were actually at my launch.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to be part of today.
I'm excited because I think that, so for those of you listening or watching, what you see is what you get with Kristian, right? And so my goal today is this podcast is, as you know, is all about, the idea behind it is to get real, because people that have a stature like yours or a platform, we end up far too often, it's like, well, that she's Christian, she's almost unattainable. We can't relate to her, or whoever it is, right? Whoever the guest is. And so, of course, I want to talk about politics, but I also want to talk about who you are, because I think that, like, in your campaign, I'm very, very familiar with it. In your campaign, it's very homegrown. It feels like you are really, when I'm watching your your commercials and even your literature, everything just feels like home, right?
Yeah.
But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to open this up to you. Do you feel like, is from the opposition, if you will, is it always an attack, or is it always the assumption of like, well, that's just an act?
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think that what makes me stand apart from a lot of other folks is that I'm a lot younger than a lot of the people that we have that are running for office. I mean, I'm 35 years old. We're 35, class of 2008. But, most of the people that are in the state house are in their 50s, 60s, 70s plus, right? So I think that's one thing. And I really just try to make my campaign about the community and about my family and about how I grew up. So, we grew up in the 90s and early 2000s on the South Side. My mom, the single mom. So I grew up that way. I got my very first job working at Bill Miller's when I was 16 years old. Do you remember me working at Bill Miller's?
I remember you being, I don't know why I have this vivid memory of you in your training outfit. Because didn't they make you wear like a white polo when you're training or something?
They did, yeah.
I feel like I remember seeing that.
Funny that you remember that. I'm sure I came to practice smelling like chicken tenders and sweet tea and stuff. But I got that job because, in cheerleading, it's one of the only sports where you have to pay out of pocket. And so it's expensive. And so I was helping my mom with those type of bills, with her medical bills. And, I think it's just something that you do when you're a kid, you help your parents. And, when I went to college in Corpus Christi, I went to A&M Corpus, go Islanders. My senior year of college, my mom actually got pretty sick. Mm-hmm. So I think I did what any daughter would do for her mom. I came home to take care of her, and I made sure that she got the health care that she needed and she was up on her feet. I was, I was waiting tables around that time, and not a glamorous job. Actually, I was pretty, and I don't really tell this to a lot of people, but I think I was kind of a bit directionless around that time. I was in my early 20s, and I didn't quite know what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So it was the summer of 2013, and I saw then State Senator Wendy Davis. And she was filibustering this bill. It was to keep the reproductive clinics in Texas, keeping them operating. So what ended up happening was she filibustered for over 13 hours this one evening. I saw a tweet from President Obama, and I remember it said, "Something special is happening in Austin tonight. #Stand with Wendy." And she'd been, I think overall she had stood for 13 hours. And I had never seen anybody literally stand up for reproductive rights in Texas before. So, just long story short, she was 30 minutes until midnight. So if you keep talking, if you're filibustering, if you keep talking until midnight, the bill dies.
Right.
So she was 30 minutes in. She had hit her third strike. So she had to stop speaking.
Okay, by strike, what does that mean?
So you have 3 strikes when you're filibustering, right? Okay. You can't go off topic, and you can't sit down. You can't stop speaking. And so they were okay, you hit your third strike. It was a BS reason. It was
Oh, so there's a judge, someone following in, saying, nope, you can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh. And they're closely monitoring, and they're seeing that she's getting close to midnight.
Trying to look at, they're nitpicking.
But here's the thing: is people like me had been watching her all day, and there had been people driving to the Austin Capitol. And so in the rotunda of the Capitol, there was all these people with signs, and they were cheering and yelling too loud to let any of the other state senators take a vote. So midnight, the bill passes. And it was amazing. I remember I was watching this in my bedroom, on my laptop. I was sitting on my bedroom floor, my back behind my bed. I was just watching.
You remember exactly that moment.
Exactly that moment. And and when I talk about it, I still get chills. It's just, for me, it was that big aha moment. And when Wendy Davis said that she would run for governor of Texas the next year, I didn't even know. I had no idea what a campaign was, how to get involved, but I signed up to volunteer. And one thing led to another, and I've been doing campaign organizing for over the last 10 years. It's become my career, right. And it's really given myself purpose, and it's really given me an ability to fight for my community, and that's why I'm doing this.
So I want to speak on that, because there's 2 things I want to say. The first thing is that for those of you watching and listening, that when you go to high school with someone, or you've known them for a long time, just innately with the way that life takes us. I hadn't seen you or spoken to you in years, but I had you on socials.
Yeah.
So it was a crazy experience for me, and I may have never even have told you this, but in our circle, and we went to McCullum, so shout out to Go Cowboys. Oh. But there's that circle is deep, meaning we have mutual friends, Mel, Kristen, Paul, Rueben,
oh, yeah.
That whole group. We hadn't spoken to you. But when we would meet up, we're like, hey, did you see Kristian was with Hillary Clinton? Did you see? Like, it was always a topic. So I don't know if I've ever told you that or if you even knew that those conversations were happening, but they were. Like, we'd be like, hey, we don't know what her role is, but did you see she took a picture? She was with the Clinton, like, it was crazy for us to see. And now, and we were also younger. Like, that was already years ago when we weren't of a maturity level or even we didn't have enough education ourselves to even know what you were doing. So to hear that story, it's like, oh. And what's also crazy is that I'm now experiencing what that moment that you had
aha moment
is the moment that I'm experiencing right now, which I want to save for a little bit later in the conversation. But I do want to ask, what was your degree? What was your major when you were going to Corpus?
Journalism.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Which you were, I mean, in high school, you had a big passion for that. You were in the magazine, I think we had.
Yeah. We had a school magazine. It was like in place of the newspaper.
Yeah.
We were both editor in chief.
I feel like we both were really big on, like, we liked to do editorial pieces instead of doing like features, because there was a very big difference. Like, it was more opinion versus factual. You know what I mean?
Right. So oh my God, we liked it so much together. When I think about it,
it's not that I forget, but I also have a brain that's like Dory. So in these like moments where I'm replaying things in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, we did do that. You know what I mean? Like, it's a big deal. And I also would like to point out for the opposition that thinks that maybe Kristian is not who she says she is. It goes as far back as to, like, in cheerleading, you would be the one that's like, no, that's not right. That's not right. We shouldn't do that. Like, whether it be silly things, like, remember that time we weren't able to be in the parade? There was like this whole, it was a very proud moment of ours as cheerleaders, because we weren't going to be in the Fiesta Flambeau parade. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, but like, there were a few of us on the cheer team that were like, Kristian was one of them. You were one of them. I feel like Deidre might have been one of them. If you're watching, I don't know if you all are, but these are all people that cheered with us back then. And it's coming to my mind, like, you were one of them, to be like, no, that's not right. Like, we got to stand up. And it may have, in hindsight, it may sound silly, like, oh, these cheerleaders weren't going to be in a parade, but it's funny to see you in the position you're in now. You know what I mean? Like, when you think of just little moments like that as a child, a teenager, and now in the future. So that's pretty cool.
And you know what it reminds me of? It's because when I tell people that I'm a community organizer, they're like, what's that? You're an organizer? Like, what do you organize closets? And I'm like, no, it's a real job.
Yeah.
And like, being a community organizer, it's because like, if you're one voice, you can get ignored.
Yeah.
But if you pull people in, it's hard to ignore a community of people, a neighborhood of people. And so I can like see myself, like, baby organizer before I even knew it, like pulling in like Kristian and Deidre and you and the Reeses and people, and being like, hey, this doesn't feel right. Like, let's stand up.
Yep.
We may be like, young high schoolers, and people may not want to listen to us, but if there's a bunch of us that can't ignore us. Yeah.
And it worked. So, okay, talk to me about, we went from, you were in college, we breezed over that, but I do want to talk about that. So you came home. How long were you home before everything happened with Wendy Davis? What was that time period?
I was there for about a year. So I was taking care of my mom, and I was working really hard. I was, I didn't have a degree, and I still don't have a degree.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's one thing that a lot of people like ask me about. And the truth is that House District 118, it's a very working class district. About 80% of adults don't have a 4-year degree.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes people think that people who don't have a bachelor's degree are like quote unquote uneducated. But there are people all throughout this district who are very passionate about their families, about their neighborhoods, and are some of the brightest people that I've ever met. A lot of my issues that I talk about on my campaign come from the conversations that I have face to face with the people in my neighborhood. And I just wanted to say that because I think sometimes people discount those type of folks, and I'm one of them, right? And I consider myself a working class person. I come from my community. And District 118, it's a very big district, and it's gerrymandered.
Oh my God.
And I think we're going to get into a little bit of that. But it's the neighborhood that raised me, and I think of myself as an expert of my community and working families.
You hit a good point, because I feel like what would be the opposite option if so, and again, I'm going to say things that maybe Kristian shouldn't or can't say because for the sake of someone attacking you for it, because it's very real, right? And I'm no pun intended, but I learned after. I'll start here. I learned after being on the campaign with you and volunteering, and more so, I was at the polls. Right, that's where I did a lot of work on your campaign, and I enjoyed it. First off, it was a part of politics or the campaign or even community service that I had never experienced. There were a lot of highs of it. There were a few lows, but not in regards to you. And the reason I bring that up is because when you're running against someone. And this probably goes for anyone in public office, but when you're running against someone that has just completely opposite opinions and views that you have, you obviously you're gonna butt heads. But what I liked about your campaign, even when you did your debates, it was kind of, I mean, it felt very just poised, but like poised in a way that also bled a little bit of your core, meaning like you weren't going to allow someone to speak over you. You weren't going to allow someone to speak, incorrect information. But I bring that up because you made a point in saying like, well, I don't have a 4-year degree. And if someone's going to bring that up about Kristian Carranza, what is my point or my question to them would be, well, what's your point? So are you saying that someone without a 4-year degree is not worthy because that's the entire community that we're serving? So you're now throwing it back in their face. So talk to me about the I guess the hurdles you felt. Number one, having no degree, if you will, but then being a woman, and then you already touched on it, but being young. I would imagine that perfect storm there. Immediately when people look at you, you're kind of battling that. Even before you shake their hand, I would imagine, right? Sure. Have you experienced that, or is it something that's kind of a dying thing? What are your thoughts?
I what's funny is that because I ran in the seat last year, and it was it was the most competitive state house district last cycle, and it is now again. So when I was running, we lost by 3 points. It was the closest state house race in Texas, so it was always competitive from the jump. But what made my race a little different was that when I became the nominee, and after I won my primary, I became the first woman of any party to be the nominee for House District 118. We had never even had a woman. Yeah,
in 2024.
In 2024. So I think that was kind of like just running as a woman was new in this district. I remember when I was going in the primary, I was going against this gentleman, very, very nice man. He was a former judge, was an elected official before, and I beat him by 30 points. And I did that because I worked harder, I organized harder, and I raised more money. So I remember having a conversation really early on. I think I had just announced maybe a month before. This is last cycle. And I remember this man coming up to me at a town hall event. It was a Democratic event, all Democrats. And he came up to me and he told me, I don't know why you're running. You're running against this other gentleman. Again, really nice guy. Right. I don't understand why you're running against him. It's not your time. Right. And I think that a lot of women often get told that it's not your time to run. Like, you got to wait. You got to do the right thing. And I didn't do that, right? I knew that it was my time because this is my community. Yep. And I knew that I had the right reasons to run. And I knew that if I would run, that I would run a really strong campaign. And that's exactly why I did it. And that's exactly what happened. So that's why I'm ready and I'm back to do it again. I wanted to share this little story. Yeah. So last week, I went to an elementary school in the district. It was East Central ISD, so kind of like far east part of Bexar County. And I went into this classroom. It was a part of their leadership academy, so it was 4th and 5th graders. And I remember, talking about, I was part of their superhero showcase.
Oh, that's cool.
It was so cute. And so I was talking about qualities of a community superhero, and I was talking about, being empathetic, and I was talking about being respectful. And this kind of talks to your point of being poised when you're having hard conversations. And, how you do that is by always remaining respectful. And I was talking about that. And I also mentioned because I noticed there was a bunch of girls in the room, and I mentioned, and if successful and if elected, I'd be the first woman elected to District 118. We've never had a girl elected before. And all the girls, like, you could just see like their eyes like lit up and their little faces got so excited and they started cheering. And I could see like the teachers like in the corner of the room like smiling too. And it was just like a really good moment. And it reminded me that representation matters. And it's important for young girls and young boys to see women being in these type of leadership positions.
Yeah, because I think that, I mean, some of us, or there are men and women, maybe they're not, in my case, right? Like, I have both my parents, right? But there are grown men that are 35, 40 years old that were raised by their tia or their grandma or their mom, and they feel that they're deserving to be represented. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I think it's important to touch on that. I think that, you know, when you feel, I'm learning over the past 2 years, I'm learning that when you feel it, you got to say it. And how you say it matters, but you got to say something. And when that burning sensation in your chest, like that's why, you know, off camera, we talked about why I wanted to bump with your episode wasn't going to be air. I wasn't going to air it until probably October, November. But with everything going on in Texas, there was this burn. I text you. I was like, I can't deal with this. I don't know how to get this out. I text Erica Prosper. I was like, I need to do something again. Like, I'm feeling it again.
That's so cool that you text Erica Prosper.
Oh, right. But yeah, that for me was like, again, going back to your point of like, I knew it was my time. Now, on that note, when you were because you helped with correct me if I'm wrong, but you had a big part of the DNC. You, at some point in your career, you were alongside Hillary Clinton. You worked on President Obama, something, correct? Can you fill me in on how did all that kind of line up for you? Was it just being on a trail and just meeting people and finding what you were passionate about?
So I worked for OFA, which was Obama's organization, and I worked on the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016. In 2022, I worked at the DNC. I was working at the DNC in the White House, and so I was advocating for about 42 states at the time. It was a lot of work. I was like working really closely with our leadership to make sure that like places like Texas got the resources that they needed that campaign cycle. And it was I always say like a really empowering job. I think it was like probably at the time like the biggest job I had ever had. And I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. So I loved that experience. But, you know, getting involved in campaigns is kind of a funny thing. Most people, you know, talk about, you know, they went to college, they studied poli-sci, they knew that they wanted to do campaign work. And to me, that was always so funny listening because the way that I grew up and where I grew up, you know, we never had people coming to our doors to knock on our doors and tell us to go vote, right? Like, had anyone ever?
No.
No one had ever knocked on my door.
I didn't even know that was a thing. I was grown adult.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I tell people that in our work and they look at me like I have three heads. But no, I never knew it was a thing. You know, I mean, I watched like The West Wing and stuff, but I mean, I didn't know like the campaign side of this work. So like I said earlier, you know, I got involved on the Wendy Davis campaign. I signed up to be a volunteer. So I went to like a phone bank where we call voters, and then they signed me up for like a Canvas launch where we go knock on doors. And I just like little by little like learned, and then they offered me an internship that snowballed into a job, and which snowballed into a career. Wow. So over the past like however many cycles that's been, 6 cycles, I've just, you know, you do a job and then you work another cycle and you do a bigger job, right? And then you go and you be that person's boss and you go and you go. And I've worked for a lot of amazing people. I've worked for a lot of women. I've worked for, do you know Ortiz Jones? I was her field director when she ran for Congress in 2018. That was her first time she ran for office. So I've worked with really amazing people, and you know, it's funny being the person that's running for office.
I would imagine.
Because I never would have thought, like, if you would have asked me this a few years, I would have been like, there's no way I'm going to run for office.
You were the woman with the clipboard running around, like getting everything situated, and now you are the face.
Exactly.
And you're the voice.
And I was perfectly happy like, being the person behind the curtain. But I think that there's a moment in everyone's life when you have to do the bravest thing you've ever done. And for me, running for office is the bravest thing I've ever done. But I'm so happy that I did it. I feel like I've grown so much as a human for the better. And I feel like we need more people like me running for office. And I don't mean just, people from the South Side, but people who have backgrounds like
Right.
ours. We need to see more representation. We need to have more working class people in the state house when decisions like the redistricting
Right.
or when decisions around funding for public schools
Right.
happens. Public education funding is my number one issue. It's the reason why I made the decision to run for this specific seat.
Right.
So in 2023, that was actually the year that I announced I was going to run for this district. Earlier that year in the spring, we had 4 elementary schools in Harlando ISD closed down.
Yep.
And a big reason, the reason for that was because of funding. So it used to be that about 80% of public school funding used to come from our state. That was about a couple decades ago. Now it's less than 30%.
Wow.
So majority of funding from our public schools comes from taxpayers, from homeowners. And that's why, we have our taxes always increase. So people, don't always know that piece of it, but it's the truth. And Texas, we have one of the largest economies in the world. We're one of the 10 biggest economies in the world. We have the money to fully fund our public schools and pay public school teachers what they deserve, but we don't do that because we prioritize other things. Right. And a good example is we spent over $10 billion on Project Lone Star. Do you remember that? When we had the buoys and everything? And it didn't make us any safer. Right. And we spent all this money on those type of things when the people that we're supposed to be taking care of here are like kids can't go to the school that they want to because it's closing down due to lack of funding. And that didn't make sense to me.
I think that's another thing that people need to see and need to hear from people like us is that like, and I'll say it, like it's funny when I'm having conversations, and follow me here. I'm gonna go around the battle to get to my point. But when I meet people, especially in my industry, right, they're like, "Oh my gosh, are you from San Antonio?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, born and raised." They're like, "Oh, well, what part of town? What high school or whatever?" And I'll say McCullum, and either they have no idea what high school that is, or I say the South Side, and their immediate reaction is, "You don't look like you're from the South Side."
Oh my God, I get that all the time.
Right?
Yes.
And to my point, it's like, well, you know what? I'm here to tell you that I am, and we don't have those conversations. But yeah, you know what? I did get free breakfast every damn morning of school. Did I have free lunch? Absolutely.
100%.
The thing is that like the harsh reality is that like more often than not, those of us that have a platform, those of us that are running for office, everyone thinks it's this glamorous thing. But and I say this humbly, now our generation, it's because of people like us who are using their platform or speaking up for the I'd say the masses, right? To say like, more of the people that had to get free breakfast and had to get free lunch need to see and hear this conversation or see people in Christians, role to be able to say, oh, I can do that, number one. But then number two, to give some hope. Because if my parents had to send me, you probably know the sentiment. We were just having this conversation at home of like, we were laughing, like, what was the cool thing to wear to school, right? Back in the day. And it was like Hollister and Abercrombie and all that, right? But like in hindsight now, I'm like, those polos have not changed in price. They're still like $50 or $60. And we were having this conversation at home of like, man, and I used to beg my parents and be so mad at them when I couldn't go shopping there. Now I'm like, can you imagine if my parents also had to pay for lunch, had to pay for breakfast for me, had to make sure that, whatever, all the things that go into funding a school, we would have to pay, if private school, whatever the case, if they had to pay out of their pocket for that or drive me to another school because my school is closed down and waste gas.
There's no way.
There's no way. There's just no way. So I say all that to say is that people like us, like it's easy to look at us when we're poised and we're at a podium or on camera and think like, oh my gosh, everything. No, we also worked hard for this, but now we realize that there's a problem. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And so let me ask you this, because I want to do a little fun exercise with you, but before I do that, was there ever a moment in your career from seeing that moment, your aha moment, to now running against John Lujan last cycle? Was there ever a moment that you thought, maybe I can't do this? And if there wasn't, what was it that kept you strong? What is it that keeps you fighting? I would imagine, the constituents, right? Like everyone in the community. But is it like, who's your core? Is there a significant other? Is it mom? Is it brother? Who are your core, your tribe?
I love that question. So it's the one thing whenever, because I push and I encourage people to run for office, young people, women, people from backgrounds like ours, people of color. I encourage so many people to run for office. And it's the one thing that I always say you need to have is you need to have your group of people. You need to have your tribe.
Yeah.
And you need to know who your people are, and you need to keep them close and pull them close always. For me, that's my mom.
Yeah.
My mom is my personal hero. She's been with me, throughout my whole life. But I mean it in terms like my mom has been somebody who has always fought for me. She's been my first advocate. She's taught me how to be an organizer. Yeah. My partner James, he's been my partner of 11 years. He's a sweet angel. He's been somebody who's been through it all with me. He's also worked campaigns, so he gets it. And I would say I have so many amazing family members, but two people that really stick out are my two tias, Angelica and Mayra. Also went to McCullum. Nice. They played soccer, so they were annoyed that I went into cheerleading. And all of their kids all still go to Harlandale schools too. So they go to Vestal, Terwells, McCullum, the STEM school. So I'm constantly interacting with all my little cousins who are all going to the schools, and so I keep a really, really close pulse on everything that's happening in my community because of them. And also my aunts are they're always there for me, and they get me, and they're people that I can vent to. But I would say that I've never felt like I wasn't where I was supposed to be.
Okay, awesome.
I've always felt like I'm where I belong because I'm from here.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing about running for office and where you grew up, is that no one can ever tell you that you're not supposed to do this, or you're not where you're supposed to be, or it's not your right time, because you're from that community. Right. So of course it's your right time. Of course it's your right
any
place.
time is the right time.
Any
at that
time
point
is the right time.
Wow. Yeah. And okay, so I want to take a break from talking about the campaign, because then I do want to jump into what's currently happening, and then also talk about your current cycle. But yeah. I want to break it down, because I feel like, again, and forgive me if I'm overstepping here, but I feel like when you do run for public office, it's an unsaid thing, right? Which is why I battle with it. One day I'm like, what if I run? But I'm not your average, right? I feel like I could relate myself to Jalen.
Oh, yeah.
McKee Rodriguez,
That's
right? So he's not the most conventional, right? I could call it a politician, but a conventional politician, because he is who he is, right? And something that I always struggle with is, maybe I will do that one day, but then I'm like, I don't know if the world's ready for this. But my point in saying that is, my point in saying that is that I understand, though, there are some, there's some lines you have to walk, if you will, we'll say it that way. And so because of that, you don't get to let loose as much. So I want to talk about what's your favorite restaurant in San Antonio. I want to talk about, what's your favorite thing to do. I want people to really understand who Kristian is.
You're blowing up my spot.
Right. So now you're going to have to go seldomly. But okay, let's start easy. What is somewhere when you've had a rough day and you're like, okay, I just need some crap food in my system. I want some greasy, whatever it is. What is your go-to, your guilty pleasure?
Well, it's not crap food, but it is greasy food, and it's my favorite. It's the Grip hamburgers on Pleasanton Road.
I'm so glad you said that. I've been trying to take my husband's cousin there, and he doesn't understand. I'm like, Griff's is so bomb.
It's top notch.
It's Whataburger times 100.
Exactly.
It's like Burger Boy's steal. You know what I mean? It's kind of that.
Yeah, it's so good, and it's been there for 40, 50 years. Yeah. Ever. And it's right there on Pleasanton and Commercial. So actually, this is funny, because I hadn't even thought about bringing this up, but since we've talked about Griff's, so do you know on Pleasanton Road they've built all those medians? Yes,
it's so frustrating.
It's so annoying.
It's annoying.
I haven't met one person that's okay with this, and so a lot of the small businesses, all those restaurants, Nico's, and they're losing money.
But on that point, and I don't know if you were going to mention this, but on that point, that is just a case in point that you have to go to you have to go to meetings, you have to have your voice heard, because when they voted for that, people voted, but the people voted, or the people that were behind the vote, of course, right? There was no one like us there, or none of our community that would have been affected by it. So all of a sudden we woke up one day and all of these barriers were built. And not only is it annoying to get through, but to your point, all of the corner coffee is a small business there.
Mhm.
Even B&B is probably affected in that area. Like the dry cleaners. I mean, there's
Mhm.
countless
There's
businesses,
so many,
barbershops.
yeah, it's really messing with the small businesses, the commerce in the community. Also, we have schools in that area, and it's making it really hard to get around when it's time to do school time. But I feel like we got to make sure, like you said, we're going to like all these meetings, like the neighborhood association meetings, like
Mhm.
that's a big one. So in that area, we have the Harlandale McCullum Neighborhood Association meeting. It meets at the Harlandale Community Center every single month. So that's another way of getting involved in your
Yep,
community.
yep. Okay, so now talk to me about you. You want to go maybe have an ice cold beer. I don't know if you drink alcohol, but if you have a beer or you want to have like a margarita, or where's your go-to for a nice like adult beverage so you can hang out with your family, or
A nice, responsible adult beverage.
Right.
It's hands down Tito's in
Okay,
Southtown. That's
okay.
my spot.
You've told me that you do go there. Yeah,
Yeah. I
Okay,
go to Tito's, I mean, at least once a week.
okay,
You know, I take meetings there
okay.
too. It's a good place. It's been around for a long time. Shout out to the owner, Mark, and all the folks that work there. They're really good
And their
people.
food is really good. Like,
Oh, it's good.
and well priced. I feel like in that area you can
Oh,
get it
totally,
expensive.
totally. Some of I think the best margarita you can get in San Antonio.
It's so good. Okay, now talk to me about what do you when Christian is at home, right? And she's gonna pop. I already know this answer, but for those of the people that don't, she's gonna pop on some music. Who is her go-to artist?
I'm a Swiftie.
I knew it.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, if you grow, so we are the same age as Taylor Swift.
Yes.
So if you grew up in 2006 listening to country music as a 16-year-old girl, yeah, you're going to listen to the other 16-year-old girl
Of
playing
course.
playing country
It's
music,
like
you
Britney
know?
Spears back when Britney Spears was a pop star.
Yeah, it's like I didn't even have a choice to be a
Yeah,
Swiftie. It
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
happened. Yeah.
Okay, and did you go to her Eras tour? Is that like? But
I-
it was. I mean, it was hard to get tickets
It was
from it.
super hard to get
Yeah.
tickets. I didn't get to go to the Eras tour, but I'm really excited for
The
her.
show.
Life
called?
of a Showgirl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a Swiftie. I am more of a Beyonce fan, in which
I love
which
that.
I do have to touch on later on when we talk about it. But I am growing to. I'm learning. This is now tying it all back in. For so long in my life, it was two things can't be true. For some reason, it was like we're taught that, right? Like we're taught that two things can't also stand true together and be parallel. And for the longest time, I was like, ugh, like I don't really care for Taylor Swift. She's not my favorite. Like I like more of her old stuff, and I don't like her new stuff. You know, the conversation that is had around any pop star essentially. And but now, because I've opened my eyes to a lot of other artists, which in my opinion are true artists. I'm not even talking about being a public figure or a pop star. I'm talking about their artistry and what
Right.
they with the movements that come behind that, right?
Yes.
And now I'm like, wow, Taylor Swift is, excuse my language, but a badass. Like
She
as
really
far as, I mean, from her documentary to Netflix that kind of went into politics, right? And she stood
Oh,
her
yeah.
ground
Yeah.
to also not backing down when it comes to like the public scrutiny, but then also being so intentional with everything she does. And I think that if everyone ran their lives or tried to run their lives like an intentional artist does, because what we live is life and life is kind of an art, right?
Yes.
I feel like things would just be more I feel like we would be able to work together. Things would just happen a little bit with less work, if that makes sense, because we would be so intentional with the way that we're moving, right?
Totally.
Okay, so I do want to ask you though, of all the jobs that you've had, right? And I'm talking before your journey in the political world. What was the worst job you've ever had to make to make a means?
Oh gosh. I worked at South Park Mall. I worked at did you?
Yes.
I worked at American Eagle. I loved working
yeah.
at American Eagle. You know, I did a lot of mall jobs. There was a job that I worked at a mall in Corpus at Forever 21. If
Okay.
you've ever worked at Forever 21, it's
It's
a
a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
believe
It's a lot. It wasn't my favorite job. I did really like working at Bill Miller's.
Okay.
I know your
A
job.
lot of people liked it.
I really did.
Yeah.
And when you're in college, every semester they pay for your books.
Do they still do that?
I probably.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that. I worked at Bill Miller for a solid 48 hours because for boys, it was a little different. If you remember, like if you were a boy, like you couldn't be at the register. Like you were
Oh, yeah.
in the kitchen or you were cleaning tables. Like, and
Remember.
I was in training as well, which is how I remember the white polo thing. And I did it for like literal summer for like 2 days. And I came home, like, I was just like, they're so mean. Like,
Oh my God.
it was little gay Ruben, like, I don't know what to do. You know what I mean? So now I would have been like, no, I'm not doing that, you know, but yeah, no, it's funny because that is a hard job, but but they paid well. As
They
you know,
did
they
pay
do,
well.
and they probably still pay well.
That was back when like $7 was like
Dude, I
pretty
worked
good.
at Sonic.
No, I
With
remember.
Shane,
I remember you worked at
For
Sonic.
$5.25 an hour. Dude.
I remember because I used to always get like the foot-long conies, and you'd be like,
No.
don't get those.
No.
But I remember, and didn't you used to wear the skates?
Dude, yeah, so Shane and I would wear the skates, but Shane was better at it than I was. Shane, for anyone that's watching or listening, he's a friend of ours, and he cheered with us as well.
Like the only two out guys at
Yeah,
high school.
literally, we were the two gay guys at the school. Actually, Shane was gay, is out before I was, but he basically he pulled me out because we had like a little crush on each other.
I remember.
But on that note, I remember there was this one time Shane was skating and he like lost control and like grabbed onto a truck side mirror, like this whole thing. But if I could be making this up, but I'm pretty sure I remember it correctly. And the owners were like older and they were like so fine with it. And I think they gave him like a $20 tip or like something crazy. But yeah, we had some crazy jobs. I worked at South Park Mall, but I was one of the people that like, oh, do you want to take a survey for money? Do you remember those?
One of those?
Christian.
That seems
And I would call
hard.
everyone like, hey, we're doing a $20 survey. Like, come, because I need to meet my quota. So, like, all my friends would come and, like, sign and get paid.
See, you were an organizer.
Right, yeah.
You were
Don't do that. I know what you're doing. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so back on a serious note now. So, I want you to educate me, but I also want you to educate everyone listening and watching because when we talk about gerrymandering, because that's affecting Texas specifically, and now soon to be California. It sounds like it's going to kind of bleed over what we see as the United States, right? Or for a majority of it. And I just didn't. Maybe you can explain to me the reasoning of even every 10 years. I believe it's supposed to happen every 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Do you know the reasoning behind just that rule alone before we jump into the nitty gritty?
Sure. So every 10 years, our country has what's called a census. And really what it is, it's just a counting of every living person in the United States. Mm-hmm. And that information is used to create things like political district maps. Okay. And so after every census, so we had the 2020 census, that's the most recent one. The following year in 2021 is when the maps get redrawn. Okay. And so they get redrawn at the state house level, like where I'm running, mm-hmm. and they get redrawn at the congressional level. And that's where we're seeing a lot of the conversation around. Right. So what has happened is the Republicans here in Texas, they want to redraw the congressional maps at the congressional level, and that's coming directly from Donald Trump. Right. So what he wants is the Republican lawmakers to do this. So the way that process is done in Texas is done through the state legislature. Right. And so we, every 2 years, our state reps, they meet in Austin to go over through all the laws. And so they have called a special session. This was this past month. They called a special session in order to redraw these maps. So what the Texas Democrats did, and this is not an illegal tactic. This is something that is within the Texas Constitution. The Texas Democrats left Texas. They broke quorum. Mm-hmm. So you need a 2/3 vote in the state house in order to pass any legislation. So they broke quorum, which is within their right to do so. And by doing so, they were able to delay the passing of these maps. So what ended up happening was they came back to Texas this past week, and Greg Abbott called another special session.
Because he knew they were here.
He knew they were here, right? So what's happening right now is the maps have been passed in the House and will likely get passed in the state Senate as well, and be passed. But what other states are doing, and this is what the Texas Democrats were doing when they left, is they went to go lobby other Democratic states, mm-hmm. like California, to make sure that they were redrawing their maps. So that way to counteract with what was going on in Texas.
So, okay. And I try to be as devil's advocate as possible. Because for me, regardless of what I believe in, what I think is right and what's wrong, correct me if I'm wrong in saying like, sure, fine, remap us, do all the things that I want to do. But what is the point in doing it earlier? You know, and I know I understand what the point is, but I think that's the argument here. It's like every interview I've seen from the Republican side is they don't really answer the question when the question is asked. Okay, fine, we understand that you want to redraw and redistrict or whatever the case, but they never answer the question of why are you doing it right now? The obvious reasons of doing it right now would be because they're trying to prepare for the next election cycle so that the Republicans stay in power in higher levels and continue to fuel our current president. And that's kind of that. I guess that's my frustration here is, have we got a direct answer of why are we doing it halfway? Why are we not waiting as we usually have it in this country? Because correct me if I'm wrong, it's happened before that they've done it before the 10-year, or it's never happened.
Not at the federal level.
Okay.
That I'm aware of.
Okay.
So, but like to kind of answer that too is like this is a blatant power grab.
Right.
That's what this is, right? It's not normal for there to be a mid-census, mid-decade redistricting. That doesn't happen. And so what they're doing is, because these maps are racist.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they're diluting the voting power of Latinos and Black people here in Texas, and they're doing that by gerrymandering tactics called packing and cracking. And so one example that I like to use is, not to jump around too much, but it is my state house district.
That's what I was
118.
That's what I was going to lead it to.
So it's a classic case of cracking and packing. So if you look at House District 118, it's a state house district. It's all within Bexar County. It looks like a backward C. So it's the Harlandale part of the south side that we're from, and then it kind of has like the Somerset area. It goes far east side, like where East Central ISD is. Has Von Army, has Almendorf area. It goes all the way up to where IKEA is, like
which is insane.
Yes.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like I call myself an average person, meaning like I didn't know anything about it until I was on your campaign. You guys, I was volunteering on the south side off of what is the county office over there?
The precinct 1.
So I was south of Military Drive.
On Pleasanton.
Yeah. I was campaigning there for Kristian. I was poll greeting. And then I had to up and move to a library, and it sounds like I'm pissed off, and I am, because it was in that moment. So the reason I'm explaining it for someone like me who didn't know, it's important that we understand, like, yeah, we can hear about, this is where the district is. No, but I was driving from the south side all the way to Nacogdoches and O'Connor Road.
34 minutes
and
away.
Kristian was still on the ballot there. Those are two different areas. And then I was driving to Universal City Library and I was polling there, which is also another 5 to 10 minutes away from that library. But if I wanted to, I could drive all the way to Elmendorf, Texas, and still be campaigning for you.
Yeah,
that is ungodly.
It's crazy. It's if you look at the maps and you try to figure out, well, what are these, like, these areas don't, I mean, if you're from those neighborhoods, they don't have a lot in common. Obviously, there's going to be some overlap
because we're
care
from
about
the same city.
Obviously. But the conversations that I had with people on the doors, very different, right? Like on the south side, we talk a lot more about like healthcare disparities because we only have one full service hospital on the south side, right? And that's not the case on the northeast side. In the Harlandale area that we're from, if you look at the map, so before the 2020 census, before these maps got redrawn in the most recent census, all the Harlandale community all used to be in House District 118.
Okay. House
District 118 has historically voted Democratic since like forever, right? It's been a blue seat forever. And now it's, depending on where you live in that Harlandale neighborhood, you can live in up to 3 state house districts. So what they did was they cracked, they split it up. They broke up the community, they cracked it. So they went in and they took out precincts. And Harlandale and the district itself is majority Latino, but the Harlandale area is overwhelmingly majority Latino. McCollum High School, where we went to high school, it's 99% Latino. Yep. And so that kind of just tells you what this neighborhood is. So it's a neighborhood that has historically voted together, voted Democrat. So if you're going in and you're cutting up the lines and you're cutting out these precincts, what you're doing is you're diluting the voting power of this neighborhood. You're diluting the voting power of the Latinos that live here. And so there are a couple of lawsuits going on right now. I just testified earlier this year in U.S. District Court about the redistricting in House District 118. So there's a couple of lawsuits that are ongoing right now because these are illegal practices, right? Yeah. They go against what our Constitution's about. So that's why I'm out here every day working it.
So to tie up that and put a bow on that conversation, I would say, or for me at least, it just seems like we're I almost start to feel like, what else can we do, right?
Mm.
And to that point, well, I used to feel like that rather. Now I'm to the point where, no, I know what I can do. I can have a podcast. I can bring people like Kristian on. I can go out and I can volunteer. Everything that's at my reach, I can do.
Yeah.
And I think that's the conversation I want to make sure that people are having outside of this episode, is like, talk about it. Go, show up, learn about it.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know until I volunteered for your campaign, even just about what I didn't even know what gerrymandering was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's a weird word.
So all that to say is, I think that outside of you and your campaign and what you stand for and all the things that you're passionate about and you would constantly fight for every day, outside of that conversation, the larger conversation is, people just need to be informed.
That's
And
right.
where we're from, no one talks about that.
Mm-mm.
Similar to the way that they don't talk about financial literacy, they don't talk about, investing, things that I do now in my career.
Mhm.
And I'm starting to realize that's kind of to be said about every single, not every single, but a lot of different, topics in our lives. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So before we wrap up, I do something with every guest. I haven't even told you that I do this. But the catalyst of this podcast was because little Rueben didn't have, when he was little, he didn't have someone to look up and say, like, that person looks like me, talks like me, does what I want to do. It was really just, to your point and what we were speaking of, our community, we were kind of, I almost feel like we were always being attacked, essentially, right? Like, we weren't ever being heard. And so the catalyst to this podcast was like, I need to dive into these stories. I need to use my platform to get the word out about whatever conversation we're having.
Mhm.
But part of that is to make sure that the little Christians are out there and looking up at Kristian and saying, like, okay, like, if she can do it, I can do it. So one thing I have my guests do before we wrap is, you can look at you can look at your camera, you can look at me, wherever you want to look. But I want you to talk to little Kristian and give her some advice and tell her, knowing what you know now, from little baby Kristian to 2025 Kristian, what would you tell her to encourage her to continue to go?
Wow. Oh my gosh. Can I take a
Yeah,
second
take a
to
second,
think
take a
about
second,
it?
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It's a tough one
It is a tough one.
because we don't do it enough.
What I would say to younger me is that the thing that you have that makes you so special is your grit. It's how hard you work. That's something that nobody can ever take away from you. It's something that'll guide you throughout your life. And even when you do these things that feel so hard, the things that feel like, man, I wish I could just tell everybody that I'm sick in the morning and not have to show up. And whether they're like interviews that make you feel like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to say the right thing, or if they're debates where you feel like you're going to go out and talk to the world in a way that you've never done before, your grit is going to get you through everything in life. And it's going to make you do things that you never felt like you were going to do before. And afterwards, you're going to look back on yourself and think like, wow, I can't believe I did it. But the thing is that everybody has grit. Everybody has this thing within inside of them. You just have so much more than the regular person. And that's what makes you so special.
I love that. It's true. Like, there's a fire. There's like, you say grit, I say fire. I
I
a
love
superpower.
fire.
You know what I mean? There's a superpower in you that comes out. But yeah, before we wrap up, it's an outer body experience when I'm talking to you. I literally had my producer, I had this the last time I had this feeling was when I was speaking to Erica Prosper. I literally get this moment of like, what the hell is happening right now? Like, in the best way.
Yeah.
So from me to you, I've told you this off camera. We text about it. I'm always going to be by your side. I'm always going to help wherever I can. And for those of you listening or watching, this is if you were looking for a sign to speak up on things that you want to speak up about, whether it be politics or not, use this as a reminder, because if you have grit or you have a superpower, it's worth acting on. So anyway, thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh my God. I had so much fun.
I'm glad.
And I want to tell you, Rueben, that like, you're somebody who has influenced me so much. No, you really have. I mean, you weren't just like the captain on our team. Like, you were like a real leader. And I think like when you're a young person and you think back on like all the people that have inspired you throughout throughout your life, like you were someone that's inspired me, and you were so confident, and you had this amazing personality, and it inspires me to like want to like go up and show up for people, and I love the way that you show up for people and for your community, and I'm so happy that we get to like be together.
Yeah, I'm excited. And when this comes out, people are gonna be like, of course. You like, it's just perfect. It's a perfect duo. Yeah.
Oh, also, okay, so but when we were in high school, do you remember when we performed Bring It On? That like that cheerleading like
I'll
routine?
send my producer the clip and we'll just drop it right here because it is, we performed that like it was a joke. It was like back by popular demand, and we would perform it all the time because it was our favorite thing to do. But
That's right.
absolutely, I do
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah, we got to do it again. We got to figure it out.
Gotta do it at a homecoming. Anyway, okay. Well, thank you guys for watching. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe. This podcast is available on all platforms. And if you don't know who Kristian is, we will have her information in the description. Please follow her. Keep track of her campaign. She does some really cool things. She was just with you had just had a rally just recently. So she is all over Texas, all over San Antonio. Yeah. So keep an eye on her socials, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Oh, and you can look more into me at christianfortexas.com.
christianfortexas.com.
myself in.
Yeah. Bye, you guys.
Bye.